Hello, everyone. Welcome to those who haven't been here before. Welcome back to those who have watched before. Thanks for coming again. My name is Leah Langley, and we are here to discuss the 8 books I read in October 2025. Lots of great books. Let's dive right in. But I also want to just mention you could find me on Goodreads at Leah Langley if you'd like to see my full reviews. Look at the things I highlighted in these books. I got a lot of these books on Kindle, which is nice. And then they link that together. So find me over there if you don't want to wait for these videos or dig into the more things. But let's start off with the first book I read in October 2025, the 43rd overall for the year, is Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. Now, Charmaine Wilkerson is an author. Her novel Black Cake, which I have right there, right there on my shelf, is one of my favorite novels of all time. So I was very much looking forward to reading her latest novel. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 on Goodreads as my review. Good Dirt is a multi-layered novel told through multiple narrators and shifting timelines. It explores family legacy and the weight of the past, how it seeps into the present, like roots beneath the soil, hence the title Good Dirt. It jumps between narrators and time periods, which requires focus, but it does pay off by adding depth and revealing the intricate interconnectedness between all of the characters and all the narrators we're kind of facing. We can kind of see from their perspective. It's really interesting. I was already familiar, like I said, with Wilkerson's storytelling because of Black Cake. But honestly, after reading this book, this was the book pick for the book club I'm in. After discussing this book, Good Dirt, with others in my book club, it made me appreciate it a lot more and made me find different meanings to some of the things. And I was able to fully re-examine the story in a sense and kind of again find that deeper meaning. Originally, I was used to this, like I mentioned, used to this style from Black Cake because Black Cake kind of jumps around too. Initially, when I started the book, I was kind of okay, let me get into this, and I was into it pretty much right away, in terms of how the book begins, kind of this kind of dramatic moment, and then I kind of was losing my way or kind of getting kind of I don't know, trying to find okay, how are we all where's the story going? Eventually got there, and like I said, I feel I felt deeper about it after discussing it with others as well, and made me appreciate it some more. And again, like I said, get a full chance to re-examine it. So yeah, I gave that a 3.5 out of 5 for my review. But yeah, that is the first book of October, Good Dirt. Next book of October is the book I wasn't expecting or planning on reading, not ever, but it kind of came up suddenly. Is Brother and Sister by Diane Keaton. Now, this book is a book I bought at a book sale, a $2 book sale. Maybe I'll link that video. Some years ago, a library was closing or whatever like that, and or a bookstore or whatever was closing, and they were selling all these books, and I just grabbed this one. It was there. And I read this because Diane Keaton passed away, I believe, second week of October, and I picked this book up. I had it, and I knew I had it in on my shelf, and I said, that's one of her memoirs. I know, let me just read it. And I read it 2 days after she passed, read it in a day. It's a pretty short book. Let me see how many pages it is. It's probably not more than 200 pages. Yeah, it's 150 pages. Text is kind of good size. So it was very easy to get through. And it's a beautiful book, Brother and Sister, about her brother who is dealing with has been for a long time and currently still is dealing with a lot. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Brother and Sister is a personal reflective memoir by Keaton. Through a mix of memory, family history, and journal excerpts, Keaton tries to make sense of how two siblings who grew up under the same roof could drift so far apart. The book is extremely honest, as Keaton doesn't shy away from her personal guilt and confusion regarding her brother's mental illness and his struggles. He also was quite an alcoholic and things like that. Maybe not anymore because he's not anyway. But especially picking up this book 2 days after she passed, it was the quiet ache that I feel like she was writing in this book really kind of made it hit even deeper. And her brother is still alive, and she goes through the whole kind of story of them. They're a year or two apart, I think, and they grew up close, but then obviously kind of paths diverge, and as she obviously was trying to care for her brother still and having this rising career and her family around them trying to care for the brother and all these kind of things going on. And I think particularly reading it in that time period, her recent passing, made it feel more and she has other siblings and stuff like that. So, but and I've heard from other people, I haven't read any of her other memoirs, but I've heard some people say It has like a similar style to some of her other memoirs that may be more like just about her exclusively, but obviously like this tale, you know, I wouldn't say tale, but speaking about her brother obviously brings it to a different place. I don't know if I said that was book 2 for October and book 44 for 2025. Third book for October and 45th for October 2025 is Us After, a memoir of love and suicide by Rachel Zimmerman. I wanted to read this book last month. So September 2025 was Suicide Awareness or Prevention Month. And, you know, a book I mentioned last month, one Friday in April I read and I talked about, and this was another book I was wanting to get, but I had to wait to get it from the library. And I read it and it was an excellent book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 for my review. Zimmerman presents her story in a vulnerable, clear, and compassionate way in Us After. She is thrown into a horrible situation after her husband dies by suicide and is left to pick up the pieces, be strong for her 2 young daughters, one of whom said after learning of her father's death, "I'm not even double digits yet." Which, Us After is a memoir broken into 3 parts, all distinct in their own way, but the book really has a great balance covering grief, investigation into her husband and after his suicide in general. She even spoke to a man named Leonard who survived his attempted suicide from the same bridge that Rachel lost Seth. Seth is her husband. A love story, renewal, and resilience, kind of all into one book. Getting this insight into someone's life after such a life-altering event was really insightful. I mean, hence the insight and moving, and I think it will help so many people on both sides of the coin. Us After was a difficult read given the subject matter, but a really beautiful memoir. Yeah, I obviously I knew this was from her perspective of a widow. Basically, after the book kind of begins with like the fateful day and kind of like the confusion, everything like that happening, and we kind of, as she goes along, starts to go into some of the things that maybe have got them there and like what could we have done and all these kind of things. And I think it's as I said in my review, I think it's, you know, it's everything doesn't look the same for everyone, but I don't know. I think it was a really brave book for her to write. Like I said, really vulnerable, really clear, compassionate to herself, compassionate to her husband, and even though she can't still really fully understand and things like that. And I believe this was released like maybe last year or year after last. So it'd been like 10 years since she had lost her husband, and you know, she's, you know, again, a love story, part love story, getting back into dating again, and renewal, and, you know, like resilience, as I mentioned. Really, really good book. Like I said, I think it's good for many people, but it was difficult at times, especially like I said, that quote, "I'm not even double digits yet," or some of the other things that she was going into after everything happens, and you're re-examining so much. Really, really great memoir. I'd recommend this one definitely. We have book 5. This is 5, I think. 4? No. Book 4 for October 2025. And 46th of the year is this excellent book called Small Dirt by Vincent Delacroix. I read the English translation of the original French novel, which is called Naufrage. I might be saying that horribly, but I'm going to write it out. Quick insert because I messed up the title of the book. The book is called Small Boat, and also the book in French is Naufrage. Imagine that in a French way. Okay, back to the video. Helen Stevenson did the English language translation. This book is stunning. I'd heard about it briefly, I feel like in passing, but Dua Lipa a couple months ago had this book down for her book club pick, and I saw she posted about it, and I like looked into it, and I thought it was something I wanted to read, and stunning. I gave it a 4 out of 5 for my rating. The novel is based on a true story from November 2021, when an inflatable dinghy carrying migrants from France to the UK capsized in the English Channel, causing the deaths of 27 of the 29 people on board, including children. Despite receiving numerous calls for help, the French authorities wrongly told the migrants they were in British waters and had to call the British authorities for help. Delacroix's narrator in this novel is the woman who received the calls and is now being accused of failing her in her duty, though she refuses to be held more responsible than others for this tragedy. Quote here, why should she be more responsible than the sea, than the war, than the crisis behind these tragedies? And I added as well, why did the people get on the dinghy in the first place and take such a risk? It's something you kind of hear. This whole book is kind of like an inner monologue in a sense, or a majority of the book. Another quote from the narrator here. I didn't ask you to leave, I said. It was your idea, and if you didn't want to get your feet wet, love, you shouldn't have embarked. I didn't push you into the water. I didn't fetch you from your village or field or ruin of a suburb and put you in your wretched, leaky boat. And now the water's up to your ankles. I get that. I get it that you're frightened. You want me to save you and you're impatient. You're counting on me, but I didn't ask you for any of that. So you'll just have to grin and bear and let me get on with my job. Our narrator received several distress calls and purposely misled the migrants. Another quote from her from the book. More likely, I thought that the English would just have to work something out by this point. They weren't our migrants. They were their migrants. In fact, these people who were neither French nor English were nonetheless more English than French now. It was very disturbing to me to be in this woman's mind, honestly, whom we primarily see in a conversation that turns into an interrogation. She wants to hear the recordings essentially, and she goes in just to go check. She's taking no ownership for any of this, and it kind of, as she starts speaking to the interrogator, essentially, it's like, oh, this lady is like what? So we're kind of reading her stream of consciousness. She's telling us what the interrogator's saying to her, but it could be distorted because she's telling us how she's receiving it essentially, and she's outlining her prejudices essentially in the stream of consciousness, and what she does not see as such, she does not see them as prejudices, and she's flat out refuses to take any sense of moral ethical responsibility for her blatant lies, and she is so cold when discussing their agony and desperation. She is so cold to them on the phone. All the calls that are recorded, but however, we can only hear her voice, which is something she is annoyed at because she cannot. The investigators can't hear how annoying they were on the phone begging for help, but also grateful because they could not hear her joking with her colleague, making jokes about, a leaky raft, and also cold in the room with the officer as she's detailing the event. The second part of this book is told through the perspective of the 29 on the dinghy. If you weren't already feeling something so disturbing by this point, after we've just been with this lady in this room for all these pages, and by the way, the book's only 100 pages. It's very, very quick to read, but again, it's a hard read because it's the topic obviously is hard. So if you weren't already disturbed by this point, by being, like I said, being locked in the room with the narrator, and it's concerning if you're not, I feel like, then you were taken to the horrible true situation that the book covers, the migrants setting out on their journey, their calls for help, and their eventual demise. Then again, back with our narrator in the third part as we continue to grapple with how this woman can look herself in the mirror every day and how she can sit there and literally feel nothing. It is so unsettling and disturbing. A quote from the book: "Their sinking didn't start in the channel. It started the moment they left their homes. Maybe they even started to sink the day they got the idea in their heads that everything would be better elsewhere, when they started to want supermarkets and child support, when they heard about Social Security, or when a cousin living in London told them you could become a billionaire by doing washing up in a Tamil pop-up shop, Tamil pop-up rather. You could say, I repeated, that all their problems stem from their inability to stay sitting quietly in a room." Though the narrator is not likable, she is written incredibly well, and Delacroix grabs you right away with his words, or perhaps Stevenson, like I said, English translation. I could have read another 200 pages of this book, honestly, even though it was, again, unsettling and disturbing, because it's a very engaging novel. It makes you think about the world we're living in, where people like this are around us and may not know it, and they could be in positions like this narrator was in, to basically be the ones responsible to save these people, or do something at least. It's like the fact that she really did nothing. Again, Delacroix took liberties, but the disaster in this story is a true story. In these times, especially when immigration is being discussed all over the world and criticized by many, Small Boat is a great work to help us look within and also look around us. I highly, highly recommend this book. I could honestly say a lot more, but I think I'm going to repeat that last bit. In these times, especially when immigration is being discussed all over the world and criticized by many, Small Boat is a great work to help us look within and look around us. I highly recommend. Honestly, an exceptional work. I give it a 4 out of 5, but that might even be too low. I might need to bring that up at least half a point or something. I don't know. But excellent novel. All right, book 5 for October 2025 and 47 for the year is Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. Honestly, this book and then my 48th book of the year and my 50th book of the year, I could all talk about them in the same kind of breath, but they cover different areas. But I was reading a couple economic type text, and I started out with abundance here on this month. Books like this give me so much hope, but they also make me want to rip my hair out, because while caught up in all the abundance being described by our authors Klein and Thompson, I also could not help but think of when this abundance would even come, and if it even could. Let me actually tell you what abundance is about briefly, and I'm going to just read the kind of note they have here for the book. To trace the global history of the 21st century so far is to trace the history of growing unaffordability and shortage. After years of refusing to build sufficient housing, the entire country they're talking about the United States, has a national housing crisis. After years of slashing immigration, we don't have enough workers. After decades of offshoring manufacturing, we have a shortage of chips for cars and computers. Despite decades of being warned about the consequences of climate change, we haven't built anything close to the clean energy infrastructure we need. The crisis that's clicking into focus now has been building for decades because we haven't been building enough. Abundance explains that our problems today are not the result of yesteryear's villains. Rather, one generation's solutions have become the next generation's problems. Rules and regulations designed to solve the environmental problems of the 1970s often prevent urban density and green energy products that would help solve the environmental problems of the 2020s. Laws meant to ensure the government considers the consequences of its actions in matters of education and healthcare have made it too difficult for government to act consequently. In the last few decades, our capacity to see problems has sharpened, while our ability to solve them has diminished. Progress requires the ability to see promise rather than just peril in the creation of new ideas and projects, and an instinct to design systems and institutions that make building possible. In a book exploring how we can move from liberalism, not only protects and preserves, but also builds, Klein and Thompson trace the political, economic, and cultural barriers to progress and how we can adopt a mindset directed towards abundance and not scarcity to overcome them. Something I want to note on with scarcity, and this is talked about a little bit in the next book I'm going to talk about. I read this book a couple years ago, maybe it was last year, I forget. It's called, I should look up what it's called, but I'll put the title here. It's Scarcity, and it's a subtitle. And it was the scarcity mindset. And I was reading it in kind of relation to and that book was kind of posed from the place of people in poverty and scarcity mindset. And since, reading about that book and things reading that book and things like that, been thinking about the scarcity mindset. And that book was kind of thinking about in terms of the poor, but even in general, they argue in this book a lot of times that we kind of have a scarcity mindset we've kind of just been in, and we've not really pushed ourselves to this abundance that we very well could have. It covers all sorts of topics, this book. It still largely focuses on the fact that the United States has, and much of the developed world, like I mentioned, has the scarcity mindset that has locked itself into limited housing, slow infrastructure, and restrained innovation. Still, it does not have to be this way because we have the means to live in a country or a world of abundance. Klein and Thompson detail how we got here with the mix of regulatory, bureaucratic, and political drag that has stifled this growth and locked us into this scarcity. They then offer an abundance agenda, which emphasizes supply-side reform, simplifying regulations, enabling faster construction and innovation, and reorienting progressive politics towards building rather than merely redistributing, among other things. We know that operating in a scarcity mindset can be detrimental to an individual, and we've seen how it can be detrimental to the United States and many others with a similar makeup. Abundance and the abundance agenda give clear proposals to get us out of this place, and again emphasize that it does not have to be this way, and how we need people committed to bring this abundance to us that is there for the taking. I'd recommend it to all who hope for a better future. And really that's it. It's that's why I said it's a book that makes you want to rip your hair out, as will my next book be, and probably my final one will be as well, because what they're speaking about here seems like such common sense. And I like to say common sense is not common. And I appreciated that they broke down all the barriers in place currently and that have kind of prevented us from getting here. But it's there for the taking, but we're not taking it. And it's frustrating because you see people continue to struggle in all different types of ways. And there's so many things we could be doing to fix that struggle. But then it's barrier, either political, either social, either economical, whatever it is. But they actually don't need to be there because we have the capability to live in this abundance, but we're just not living in it. Really, really great book. If I didn't say, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Really great book. And this is going to lead into my next book, which it didn't just happen to be this way, but one of the authors, Ezra Klein, is married to the author of my next book. So let's talk about that. So the author of my next book, who, as I mentioned, is married to Ezra Klein. This book is Give People Money, How Universal Basic Income Would End Poverty, Revolutionize Work, and Remake the World by Annie Lowrey. I bought this book a while ago. This was in my stack of books. I'll put a picture here that I bought like maybe a year ago or less of these like economic type books I was trying to look up and read. I had this book for a while and I wanted to read it and I finally got to it. And I was like, oh yeah, look, and Annie and Ezra are married. Which I didn't even realize that they were married until Annie was on his podcast some years ago. I think maybe around the time that this book was published or republished or whatever. And when I started listening, Ezra Klein has a podcast in the New York Times. I started listening to that podcast as he introduced her. He said, and my wife, I said, oh, I didn't know that. Anyways, this is my first work of hers I read, I guess. So why would I know? Anyway, so that's a nice little thing. That book is what is this? 6 for October 2025 and 48th for the year. Another book that kind of makes me want to rip my hair out sometimes because, like I just mentioned, it makes sense, but all these barriers. My review says, just give people money. Just do it. It's common sense. Like I said, not common sense is not always common. And for those who think it isn't, Annie Lowrey lays out exactly why it is. As her subtitle promises, she explains how a universal basic income, or UBI, would end poverty, revolutionize work, and remake the world. Lowrey builds her case with a blend of research, history, and storytelling. She cites study after study after study after study, examining both small-scale and national trials of UBI, and challenges deeply held American ideas about work and worth. She goes into the whole thing about, I'll even say them, you guys know what I mean, work and worth. People, we assign value to people, or we feel like, anyway. She dismantles common myths like the belief that people would just stop working if we give them unconditional cash, and instead shows how economic security can actually unlock creativity, productivity, and dignity. I'm going to pause on that quickly. So often some people, they love to say that, oh, these people just want this money because maybe they're not working or they should get a job. A lot of people are already working. And like let's say in a lot of the studies she was citing, it's like the times when overwhelmingly people would not stop working because it wouldn't be like enough to live on. But even if people did stop working, it would be like the elderly who could finally maybe retire, or people who were caregivers who maybe had young children who needed to like be at home with them and had a little bit of extra boost to kind of help sustain them somewhat economically. People love to just, jump to that. And it's anyway, a lot of people who are on welfare, things like that, work a lot harder, I feel like, than a lot of people actually realize. And anyway, she was going into that a lot, but I'll pause there. By the end, Lowrey makes a convincing and compassionate argument that direct cash transfers are not just more efficient than traditional welfare programs, but also more humane. Give People Money is both an economic proposal and a moral one, a call to imagine a fairer, freer society built on trust rather than punishment. This book was really excellent. And like I said, I really appreciated how she wasn't just, no one would want a book like that. She wasn't just talking. She said, here's this example, here's this example, here's where this failed, here's where this was different. Like there was an example from, I think it was called Give Directly as an organization that they still do this, where they give people money directly. And one of their examples she cited was in a village in Kenya. And what they did, they kind of did two different ways. They did one village where they gave people a lump sum of money at once. They did another one where they gave people money. I think it was worth $27 in the United States, and much more there. It was like, you get this money every month for the next 9 years. And they like give them phones, and it's like comes through like electronically on the phone, whatever. And seeing the impacts in the community, because it was like, oh, now I'm able to go buy a goat, and now I'm able to go like do all these other things. And that also not just lifts me up, but it lifts the community up. And then you see the community get higher. And also, again, thinking of the whole scarcity mindset thing I mentioned, one family she was speaking to, they like got this payment, whatever, and they were looking forward to, oh yeah, my daughter's roof is broken. We could fix her roof. And then Annie said to them, what are you looking forward to? Like, 10 years from now, what do you think life will look like? And then they're like, well, the roof will be fixed, because sometimes they're in this mind of scarcity. But think about if you can get like a little bit of cash every month, and in that community in particular, they were well below the $2 a day kind of, I think it's the UN qualifier or standard for poverty. You're able to get, so maybe I shouldn't say a little money, but you're able to get some money every month, and think about all the things you could put into either, again, like mentioned, like, and instead shows that economic security can actually unlock on creativity, productivity, and dignity. You can do so many things in your own life, but also in your community. Like, even because, you're able to buy more food, you're able to buy a goat from the guy who sells goats in your village. Obviously you're lifted up, but also you are too, or they are too, but you're lifted up because you can maybe go like produce things faster, or they can buy more goats, and then they could, it's like, it makes sense. And also comparing it sometimes to different organizations who like give food sometimes, or they give Tom's shoes. She mentioned, like, she's like, sometimes I would walk around, there'd be like boxes of Tom's shoes or boxes of all these mosquito nets and all these things that a lot of times they actually end up in the hands of people who could have probably got the shoes themselves or didn't really need the shoes or whatever, because the people who need the shoes, those shoes actually are not good for them in terms of the work they're doing. If you've owned a pair of Toms, you know those Toms are like, they can, they break. Okay. And anyway, so like thinking about like, it actually makes more sense and give directly. The organization looked into this, like, well, should we give something else? Should we just give money? And they kind of figured out like, oh, money's actually just like better to give. And it's just more, give directly. It's more direct to getting at the root of the issue. Just giving people money. I don't know if I said that I gave it a 4 out of 5. This is a really, really great book. I'm trying to read that whole stack of books by this year. I have like another 3 left, I think, and hopefully I'll get through them all in the next 2 months. But this really great book, really recommend it. Again, similar to how I mentioned with Abundance, which is the book Ezra Klein co-authored. People who want to think about a better future and things like that, and maybe just have interest in what a UBI looks like. And also I will mention, she didn't just mention studies from other places. There's studies and these kind of experiments happening in the United States. Okay. And it's not like it's like, oh, it's in these other places. No, it's happening here as well. And it's working out very, very well. And also I want to pause. And the thing is too about UBI, because some people say, well, while everyone like Jeff Bezos or Jamie Dimon, whatever, they don't need a UBI. Like they don't need to get money. But she also was speaking about some of the like bureaucratic hurdles that could come when you have to get people to qualify for it, and how much easier it would be if it's just everyone just gets it, no matter what. Think about how much time you save by not having to like make sure, oh, this, I'm not giving it to Bezos, I'm not giving it to, and yeah, they could turn that money to someone else. I know it's not necessarily a life-changing amount of money, but that gets rid of some of those hurdles. And she gave some examples of India and kind of the program that they have. And sometimes those hurdles that they've been going through, and they have quite a unique system and all that kind of thing. It's very good. She also was talking about like, a lot of times women have a whole bunch of unpaid labor that we do. We take women often, the ones who are taking care of the home most often, take care of the children most often. She cited in, I believe it was Sweden in 1975, when the women went on strike, and just, they stopped doing like anything. And all the men were freaking out, and they had to, citing all these things, even giving women like a little bit of money, maybe women who are, in the home taking care of the kids, whatever. And also think of all the economic losses women take from being out of the workforce from those years, and even being back in. Sometimes they're always, valued at less and whatever else. Really, really great book. I can keep talking about it, but I'm going to cut it short because we got 2 more books to get through. But definitely one I recommend. All right. 7th book for October 2025 and 49th for the year. Kind of came randomly. It is called This Boy's Life, a memoir by Tobias Wolff. I watched the film This Boy's Life with Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, and I finished it, and I said, okay, let me actually read the novel. I see it's pretty short. I can probably fit it in. Let me read it. And I kind of watched that movie randomly. I was on Tubi watching something else, and then it came up after that movie finished, and I was like, oh yeah, I think that's, I heard that, saw the title, and I said, I feel like this is a movie I've like had on my list before, maybe, or it's one I've wanted to watch. And it was Leonardo DiCaprio's like first big film. It also came out the same year that What's Eating Gilbert Grape came out, which got him his first Oscar nomination. This came out earlier in, I think, 1993. He had another movie before that was like direct to video, but then this was the one that was like on screen and whatever like that. And De Niro handpicked him and all these kind of things. And now we have Leonardo DiCaprio everywhere, obviously. And the movie was excellent. Side note here, I have a letterboxd at Aaliyah Langley. You could find me there. I watch a lot of movies. If you never knew that, I don't know how often you're on this channel. I watch a lot of movies and I talk about a lot of things with movies. But yeah, you can see my letterbox rating there if you want. Anyways, This Boy's Life. This memoir is a great coming-of-age memoir. I give it a 4 out of 5. Let me say that first, following young Tobias, or he goes by Jack, is what he wants to be called, what he is called for a majority of the book. Set in the 1950s, his mother, who's a nomad, she wants a better life for her and her son and wants to find a man who can help get them there. Obviously, think this is 1950s. Come on here. She eventually marries Dwight, and his true personality shows pretty quickly in the marriage. At this point, they're living in Washington. Wolf writes very candidly about this instability, particularly regarding Dwight and that relationship. He reflects on these times in a very honest way, even acknowledging his own downfalls rather than focusing solely on others. This Boy's Life is a heavy story, but Wolf approaches some moments with humor, even if dark in emotional depth, as you can see that he has truly taken the time to reflect on this time, which is why we're able to read a book like this and follow his journey into the future despite all the challenges he and his mother faced. The film adaptation is also very good and all those kind of things. I think especially because seeing where he came from and all the kind of struggles he had with, like, even before getting to the point with Dwight, but of course you can tell the period of his mother being married to Dwight was quite a tumultuous period for him and also his mother and all these kind of things, an abusive man in all different types of ways. But being able to see that, obviously reading this, you're holding the book, or in my case, my iPad, I'm holding the book and seeing it and reading it and knowing that he made it out, he was able to have a good life from this and even were able to read this book, I think is a tremendous, is tremendous. And it's a really, really good book, really great movie. This Boy's Life. All right, little confetti here. 8th book for 2025, but more importantly, 8th book for October 2025, but more importantly, the 50th book for 2025 is Homelessness as the Housing Problem, How Structural Factors Explain U.S. Patterns by Clayton Page Aldrin and Greg Colburn. This book actually was mentioned in Give People Money by Annie Lowrey. So often, a lot of the economic books especially, but so often in general, I will highlight, and again, find my Goodreads, I will highlight books, like quotes from books and add to reading list and like add them later. This was one where I looked it up pretty immediately and it wasn't too long and I said, okay, I can read this. I think I finished it like the last day. I don't know when I finished it, maybe the last day of the month. I don't remember. But I gave it a 4 out of 5, a lot of 4s out of 5s. And it's a great book. The statement, homelessness is a housing problem, which is also the title of this book, should not come to surprise for anyone paying attention. Colburn and Aldrin lay out exactly why that's true, tracing how we got here, how homelessness is often underestimated, and why it looks so different from city to city across the U.S. They move beyond surface-level explanations to show how housing supply, cost, and policy failures, not personal shortcomings, drive the crisis. The authors also offer clear, data-driven solutions focused not on temporary fixes, but addressing homelessness at its root. They argue pervasively that real progress means building more affordable housing and changing how we think about who deserves it. Homelessness is a housing problem echoes themes I've encountered in works like Matthew Desmond's Evicted, Pulitzer-winning book. I have it right here. I will link that video when I talk about Evicted. It's an exceptional book. I recommend it to every single person I speak to. Has a lot of themes that Matthew Desmond talked about in Evicted, yet it stands out for its accessible use of data and city-level comparisons. It is an essential read for anyone who wants to understand how structural causes the homelessness and be part of meaningful change. Kind of like their key point in this whole book is like, why is homelessness much more common in some cities than others? And, you often think about, Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or things like that, places like that, these big places. that have like a high rate of homelessness. But then you look at cities like other big metropolis cities like Houston or Dallas or the state, let's say, it's not a big city, but the state of Mississippi. Mississippi is so low in so many of the ratings consistently over and over and over compared to the 50 states. I think they're like, at least when this book was, this study, I think maybe from 2019 or 2020, whatever, they were like second in terms of like homelessness, like, which is good. Like, it's better to be higher on that list. And like, you're talking about places like Seattle, which has like, specifically he was talking about like they have no like, I think, income tax and things like that. And think about how Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos are over there or whatever. And oftentimes you end up seeing that when poverty is low, homelessness is low. But when poverty is high, homelessness is usually high, where some people might think it'd be different. He also tackles things like people are not homeless a bunch in California because, it's so warm out here. Like, that's also doesn't track, and really breaking down like why it looks different and why like New York does well, let's say, with having a lot of shelters for people to stay in, whereas California does not. And how some people like, especially if you look in the past several years with like Gavin Newsom in California and Mayor Karen Bass, like, oftentimes people look at, encampments, or even in DC, where we're taking people out of, where they're staying and things like that. It also becomes a policy problem because people are thinking about people's perceptions of seeing these people on the street and what kind of thing, and just wanting them out of their sight, let's say. But a lot of times we're focused on temporary solutions of just putting people up in a home and whatever. And also, like I said, underestimating the actual problem because, people can be homeless. They're sleeping in their car. People can be homeless. They're sleeping in a shelter. They're homeless on the street. They're homeless all over the place. And also, you cannot find everyone at every minute of the day and everything like that. But yeah, instead of focusing on temporary solutions, we have to build more affordable housing and changing how we think it deserves it. And again, thinking about, like I mentioned, Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson's book, Abundance, like the housing shortage we have and some of the barriers to actually getting there. They were talking a bunch about zoning laws and how that's kind of messed up a bunch of things. But we can't keep focusing on the temporary. We actually have to, not even just with like the unhoused population, but I mean across the board. Quick little band-aids aren't actually fixing the problem. And again, I would bring in Give People Money by Annie Lowrey, which again, I heard about this book I heard about homelessness as a housing problem through Annie Lowrey's book. She cited it in there. Think about what giving people money could do for that population. And again, people like to be focused on, it's people are personal shortcomings. They didn't do this right, or they didn't do that right, yada, yada. They don't want to work. They don't want to, all that is a bunch of crap. And a lot of the times, and the research, the data just does not actually line up with that. And I always like to say, like, some people who love to defend certain things, you're much closer to being unhoused, or let's say being on a social service program like SNAP or like TANF, which is like TANF's food assistance, I think, as well. You're much closer to being on that route, being on like a food assistance program or being unhoused, than you are being like Jeff Bezos or being Bill Gates. You're much closer to that, to going that way. So that's not like, I think people are, anyway. That's this book. It's a great book. It's book 54 of the year. A book I really recommend to everybody. Again, another one of those that makes you kind of like make you want to pull your hair out, because again, the stuff seems simple, and why can we actually not get there? But I would say, like I said about Abundance and Forgive People Money, if you want to think about how we can be in a better future, and you want to also be part of meaningful change, read a book like this. As I said, those three books can all kind of go together in a sense, because they have similar drives. Obviously targeting different areas, but yeah. All right, those are the 8 books I read in October 2025. Like I said, overall, really great reads. Really, really great reads. We have 2 more months left of the year. November and December. We'll see how many more books I get through that time period, but send me recommendations. I want to read something kind of like softer and nice. I have some books here. I think they're like it's blocked, but I have some books I want to read that I've bought a while ago that are kind of like maybe a little bit lighter. I don't know. I actually don't know, because I heard they might be a little, anyway. I'm going off on a tangent here. I want to read something kind of lighter to some level. It's the holidays coming around and that kind of stuff happening. But I also have this growing list of books, as you know. And like I said, I want to get through that stack of economic books I bought like at the beginning of this year or whatever. And I'm working on one right now, and hopefully I'll finish that in a couple of days. But yeah, send me your recommendations. Find me on Goodreads at Aaliyah Langley. Continue the conversation with me. Like I said, a lot of these books I have on Kindle, so I was able to highlight a bunch and add notes. Other books I recommend, like I said, the whole add to my reading list and other things like that. Find that all over there on my Goodreads at Aaliyah Langley. And yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books, if you want to, tell me about your thoughts about these books, all those kind of things. Do that in the comments. Find me elsewhere. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I look forward to making another one of these. I feel like it's been so long since I've had like a good little video like this about, obviously I do them once a month, but yeah, good stuff. Talk to you guys later.